Hey guys, how are you all doing? This is D. Durrell with D. Durrell Life Solutions. I hope everybody is having an excellent day. Today I'm going to give commentary on my analysis of a phenomenon that I am seeing, and I've seen this for a certain period of time. It involves, and it's disheartening me because many of you all that follow me know that I am Pan-African, and I do value Pan-African concepts. So what I'd like to talk about today is this YouTube social media beef between Africans and African Americans, or Africans and foundational Black Americans, or ADOS, or those who are people of African descent who are American citizens. First of all, I'd like to say it is disheartening for me to see people of African descent, whether you are an indigenous African to the continent or to America, okay, or you were born in America or in the diaspora, meaning throughout the whole world. It is also disheartening to hear the disdain that a lot of African people who have migrated to America to have this innate distaste for people of your own racial group. One of the things I don't understand, and I know that this is an issue with African people throughout the world, and that's why we're in the position we're in now, is that we place culture, nationality, over racial status. And if we function more from a position of culture, if we focus more from a position of culture than nationality, we will always be divided, or culture than race, I'm sorry. If we focus more on race and racial connection than actual language and culture and nationality, we would be together. We would have more unity. And so we're finding more ways to divide and prove who's better than who, and who is in this position and who is not in a certain position. And I know there are certain content creators such as Tariq Nasheed, who has been at the forefront of the FBA, particularly Yvette Cornell, who has been the person for ADOS. And they focus, not particularly Yvette, but definitely Tariq, and also another guy such as Mike TV and others who have done countless content that relates to the interaction of Africans versus FBA, or African Americans, ADOS. I understand through my interaction with people who are from the countries of Nigeria, Senegal, Cameroon, Ghana, particularly Ghana and others, that when they come here, part of their American assimilation is that people, particularly the government and those that are in the immigration hub, discourage them from interacting with African Americans. And also, we have to understand the propaganda. The propaganda is just as strong as far as the negative perception of African Americans in this country, and it is just as strong internationally of people seeing images and of African American people in a certain way. And I'm going to be honest, and I'm speaking to my community. We have done a disservice as it relates to social media acting in ways that are consistent with some of the propaganda. We have went out of our way to provide truth to fallacies. We have went out of our way to act in ways that are stereotypical, that is not a representation of African Americans in this country. And so what's also very, very disturbing to me is that many of these immigrants our people, our African brothers and sisters, come here with not understanding the true history of African Americans in this country. The very reason any immigrant, period, particularly of African descent, or any minority group outside of Europeans, they'll let Europeans come in here in droves and any chance that they can get to increase their numbers. But for any minority or any person, particularly those of African descent, not understanding the laws and the history behind you having the ability to be here in the first place. Okay? You owe that to us. And any immigrant group should understand that all of these minority rights, civil rights, the ability to get all types of benefits, the ability of you to come to this country as an immigrant and file for citizenship, get visas and all of these things that allow you to come here legally, that was part of the civil rights movement. Okay, that was part of the civil rights movement. Okay, before the civil rights movement, very few indigenous Africans were migrating to America. Very, very few. It wasn't until those laws came into play and started to surface in the early 70s that you began to see more and more African students coming to America, those that had education that came here and they sought jobs, and many of them got into entrepreneurship and so on. I have seen many situations. To me, I'm gonna be honest, most of the interaction that I have had in Houston has a large indigenous African population. We have well over 250,000 immigrants, or people who are second generation Nigerian and Ghanaian, who are in other Ivory Coast and so on, who actually live in this city. You can go in any part of Houston, Texas, and you may see an African grocery store, a Nigerian grocery store. Okay. Also, there's a certain area that I've seen. It's not like a little Haiti or a little Jamaica or anything like that, but there's a small hub in Southwest Houston where you will see several Caribbean stores and restaurants, a little enclave. Okay. To me, it's embarrassing because you don't hear the Mexican American looking down on the Mexican national. You don't see the Chinese national looking down at the Chinese American. Okay. You don't see the Indian looking down at the Indian American. But you do see evidence of Africans who are indigenous to the continent looking down on African Americans. You also see Black Latins, or I would say Black Latins or who look down on, or Afro Latinas who look down on African Americans, and they go out of their way to say I'm not black, knowing that they have African ancestry. Okay? And you also see Caribbean Americans who also have the same sentiments. Okay? And then my position is that we fought, and see, this speaks to the psychology of the Negro, because the psychology of the Negro, we have to understand that the psychology that was embedded into the Negro is to think of others more than you think of yourself. That's what kept us in slavery. Many slaves cared more about their master, who cared more about the people who owned them than themselves. Okay? It has been embedded in African American culture through the use of religion, laws, and other propaganda that despite the mistreatment, you should love this country even more than we do. And you should be appreciative of the little that we decided to give you. And so the Negro, the psychology of the Negro has always been in a situation to try their best to blend in, assimilate, and try to attempt to make people feel that you're not a threat, or to make people feel that, you know, you're acceptable, you're civilized. Okay? You have to prove to us. We, as African people in America, don't have to prove a goddamn thing to anybody. Okay? First of all, there would be no American culture without black people in America, because we created the majority of what is American culture as it relates to food, music, certain sayings, phrases, gestures, clothing. And the thing about it, just because it's not written in books, and just because people stole those things from us, the inventions and etc., people think we have a very little contribution. Or the fact that those things are documented, but they're not taught, and the American public in itself is not educated on the contributions, the true contribution. I don't want to hear about, in Black history about I was the first black man to go swim around the river and all that. No. I'm talking about, the creation, our ability to create devices, intellectual property, technology, okay? Theory. We were thinkers, we were philosophers. Despite doing these things in the conditions that were imposed on us. That's what makes African Americans so great, because despite all of the adversities, we still rise and you find genius. Okay? Now, it's not my fault that my African brothers and sisters throughout the diaspora that come here don't see that. And they only are going, and they're so naive to what other people are telling them. And so, but I also want to turn that back to us, because we also, as African Americans, have made fun of some of these people, and we have taken in and believed the propaganda that America told us about our own people on the continent, simply to discourage us to go there and find out ourselves. That's the whole purpose of that. America does not want African Americans to leave. They do not want us to connect, okay? They don't want us connecting with African countries. They don't want us procreating and creating new generation of Africans who can no longer say, I don't know my language and I don't know my heritage. Okay? They don't want that. Okay? They don't want us taking on African last names, African customs, African religion, African diet, because an African diet is more healthier than an African American slave diet. Okay, there's all types of levels that we can look at this. That there's so many levels that we can look at this. But it is disheartening, because it is disheartening to me because the misusage of technology, because we should be having stronger ties as it relates to the continent. And they should have stronger ties with us. We should have a vast array of trade and investment from Africa to the South, or to African American hubs throughout this country and enclaves and communities. We should be trading. We should be investing with one another, because at the end of the day, we're all African people. Now, you want to put culture and language and religion over race, then you're working against us as a people. Marcus Garvey, as a Pan-African, stated, the black man is weak everywhere. The black man is weak in Africa, in his own land. The black man is weak in Brazil. The black man is weak in Cuba. The black man is weak in a weaker position in America. So why are we, in any sense, looking down as if you're stronger than it when at the end of the day, as a community, we're weak? Now, fortunately, there are some things changing. Okay? There are some things changing right now in West Africa, in which things are shifting a little bit. And I am hoping for the $5 trillion of GDP that African Americans produce, that we stop spending and giving our wealth away to other people and give it to ourselves, invest in our other brothers and sisters as well as they invest in us. Then we have something to talk about. But we don't have time for this foolishness of thinking, you saying such things like a kata and saying things like African booty scratcher and all this other silliness. The time for play is it's over. I don't want to hear about the colorism. Okay? The coloristic aspects interculturally within our group. We don't have time for that. The time is now that we're in a position as African people throughout the world that we can actually turn this around in a generation. So why are we going on Tariq's show? You got Somalians and Kenyans on there acting a fool. You got African Americans talking crazy and saying all kinds of negative things out of ignorance towards Africans throughout the continent. You have Afro-Latinos who are darker than me saying they're not black. I'm Latino. Refusing to admit the racism that goes on in the Latin community. Not only the racism, but the colorism among African Latinos of African descent. These things are real. So I don't understand the concept of an FBA versus African beef, when in reality, we're in the same boat. And the people who are outside of our community are looking at this as silliness. Okay? They're looking at this as Negroes basically arguing for nothing and accomplishing nothing. That is the reality of it. That's what we're doing as a community. It has no significant benefit. There's an African lady right now, I think she's Nigerian, who's viral right now for saying that we're going to boycott your businesses or not allow you to shop in our businesses. You don't want to go to war with Africans and all of this. And I am Pan-African. I plan to take a pilgrimage to Burkina Faso. I plan to go and reconnect with my ancestral tribe, which is also in northern Ghana and also southern Burkina Faso. I plan to have a cultural, spiritual, social, educational, and lastly, an economic connection to Burkina Faso, particularly with the Gurunsi ethnic group, the Kassine people, which is my the tribe that I have been, traced. That is my tribe, my ancestral tribe. Okay? I will never and have never engaged in a negative back and forth about cultural issues with another person of African descent. Now, I had a couple of situations with some Caribbeans that were speaking of Caribbeans being great in certain little areas and they're better than us in this, and I quickly dismissed that the ignorance of you in America, establishing how great you are in a country you don't want to live in, and I just left it at that. I'm not going to go back and forth, but I've done business with Nigerians and I've done business with Ghanaians. And I have trained a lot of counseling professionals who are from the continent as nurse practitioners. I had nurse practitioners who did internships, and I've also done particularly counselors, okay, who came to my facility to get their clinical hours, okay? So I watch it, I'm studying it, but I'm not going to engage in participating in buffoonery against people of my own racial group to prove who is better when we're both in a bad compromising position. Okay? So I just wanted to kind of talk to you all about that. I appreciate you all for being here. This is D. Durrell with D. Durrell Life Solutions. I hope you all have a great day.